across Ontario. We also wish to acknowledge that the office of the RNAO is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which is an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources all around the Great Lakes. We also recognize that the participants of today's event are located on other traditional lands across Ontario. Today, this land is still home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this territory. By personally making a land acknowledgement, you're taking part of an act of reconciliation, honoring the land and Indigenous heritage that dates back over 10,000 years. We encourage you to learn about the land you reside on and the treaties that are attached to it. Land acknowledgements are an act of reconciliation, and we must all do our part. And if you are wanting to learn a little bit more about the land that you work and live on, you might want to look at this website, nativeland.ca. It's an interactive map, and it helps you get started to learn a bit more. So this is our plan for today, the agenda. So in just a moment, I'll turn things over to Dr. Doris Grinspan, RNAO's CEO, and she is going to provide some updates and reflections talking about our recently released Nursing Through Crisis, a comparative perspective report, some program announcements that were released during Nursing Week that helped to respond to the Nursing Through Crisis report, and then talking about our recent 97th AGM, what we did during the AGM and some reflections. We'll have a question and answer. And then the second part of today, we're going to be hearing from two registered nurses, Jennifer Waite and Deborah Lafave, and they are going to talk about embracing uncertainty through our nursing stories. So we're delighted and welcome to Jennifer and Deborah. Thank you for joining us. We'll have a discussion and then some final remarks and closure. So that's the plan for today. And I think I'll turn things right over to Doris. Also, just a reminder that the session is being recorded today. And as always, you can find our archived webinars on our website. So Doris, on to you.
Thank you so much, Susan. I think that you all heard about our report of Nursing Through Crisis, a comparative analysis. We did a webinar where we actually shared some of the specifics. So we are not going to spend today the entire session speaking about the specifics, but I do want to share some perspective. And I'm sharing this in the spirit that we all need to understand that this is not only an Ontario crisis, and it is absolutely critical that as we respond, whether it is to the situation in Ontario or to social media on this, or to any conversations you have with colleagues in nursing and outside of nursing, that you remember that. And I'm saying it because just 2 weeks ago, a paper that I wrote with 6 other colleagues from around the world was accepted by the board of the American Academy of Nursing, pending some revisions that needs to have. And then from there, and to have a paper accepted by the Academy board is not small feat. Let me start there. We also had one accepted related to long-term care and international perspective. And from there, then after revisions, etc., it goes to Nursing Outlook. And it is dramatic. And it makes the situation in Ontario not any better, but actually more difficult. Because when the US primarily, right, is suffering a massive, massive shortage, and then you have Canada during the weekend, the president of CMA wrote about it, related to doctors, related to other health professionals. She didn't specify too much nursing, and related to ERs closing in certain places, advocating for primary care, etc. Across this province, across this country, New Brunswick closing places. I know Manitoba is closing places. We all know Ontario is closing places. It makes the situation even more critical because, you know, it's a resource that is dwindling at the time that more and more is needed, because everywhere there is the catastrophic wait times for surgeries and for home care and for other needs. So the fact that we have 75.3% of our colleagues suffering from burnout, and the fact that 69% of them, if I recall correctly, say they will change positions, not that they will leave nursing, but change positions. Just picture, right, a revolving door. If 69 change positions, just picture any of your workplaces, right, where this is happening. And the fact from that 69%, there is a serious percentage that are thinking twice what to do. It tells you we are in a tremendous difficult situation. Yet the question to me and to my colleagues at RNAO and to the board and to staff and all of us, I hope, that are attending today, is what's the best way to get us out of the crisis? Because it is a crisis, and let's call it, it's an international crisis. So what's the best way to get out of it? And that we don't continue to spiral down, but we start to kind of, you know, go up, you know. And that's what you will see with the programs that we are launching, that we are not waiting to do, that Susan referred to, and that we announced at the AGM and pre-AGM even. And that is also at the core of what we will continue to work with government and with opposition parties, with effectively all MPPs, and also conversations that we're having across the country. Next one, please, Susan, and then we can go back at the end to any questions that people may have. So with that in mind, and not to say that this is all that we are doing, you will see that we continue to frame our work, and there we continue to put our work in focus. That's the best way to put it in focus, to do it absolutely comprehensive across all departments of RNAO, and then to put it in focus so others, both inside the association and most importantly outside the association, can refer to these areas of foci that we are having. And again, I want to reinforce that it's not that this is all we are doing. We are doing many other aspects, but this is areas where we are exploding, so to speak, in terms of work amongst the various departments of RNAO. So 3 layers to the in focus, just to remind you, and I will invite you to look at that. And Susan, you can Google Doris Greenspoon in focus RNJ, and we can put the article. It may help to people to have it as a reference. The first is RNAO and health equity. And in here, we are focusing on 3 priority areas. One is Black nurses and RNAO. And this is about the work that we are doing with our colleagues that are Black. And we are doing it in all the domains, whether it's policy, whether it's a new BPG that we're focusing, whether it's advocacy, whether it's working inside RNAO or with other like-minded groups, with the intent to really push up and give to our Black colleagues equality of opportunities. And that again leads then to the nursing crisis. If people don't feel that they have equality of opportunities, right, then of course that suffers the consequences. Similarly with Indigenous health and RNAO. And last and not least importance, to our 2 SLGBTQ+ communities, and all the aspects of 2 SLGBTQ+ communities. And let me stress the area of trans communities. Trans communities in nursing. I had the tremendous opportunity to attend during Nursing Week a session being done by one of our chapters. And it was all around trans communities in nursing, how to relate to others, how not to relate to others, how not to prod, how, to relate to one another. It was magnificent. And I have chatted with our group that is working in RNO into LGBTQ+ to try to find that podcast so we can put it with their permission, if there is permission, within the 2SLGBTQ+ in focus, which is coming, of course, in June during Pride Day. And there is so much learning that we all need to do. And again, when you talk about equity, you talk equality of opportunities, these colleagues that are perhaps the most affected, and not to say that others are not, but, Black colleagues, Indigenous colleagues, 2SLGBTQ+ colleagues, if they will tell us check mark on the area of, yeah, we feel we have equal opportunities, equal chances, it will start to say we're doing something well, right? As a community of nursing. And RNO wants to take a lead on that. And is taking a lead, much learning that we need to do. And I will comment on that. Remind me, Susan, if I don't, on the issue of much learning we need to do. Health system transformation. The areas that we are focusing is LTC, not because anything in particular, but because it was a disaster during the pandemic. And let me tell you, not only in Ontario, worldwide, it was a disaster. The study that we did, or the paper that we did, compared Spain, US, Canada, and Australia. And Australia a bit better than us, but a disaster overall. And when you look at the data internationally, something needs to give in terms of doing better for vulnerable seniors and vulnerable people that live in LTC. Second is nurse practitioners at RNO, and there is a space for Breathing Smile there because, of course, we have gotten the 75 additional nurse practitioners approved for funding for LTC, and there is expanded scope, and yet there is much more to do, right? Much more to do in a time that there is crisis in human resources. RNs, CNSs, and RNO. And Imagine, I haven't had the chance to chat with you because this came to me over the weekend. But I make these kind of things public as they come because we're all on this together. But it just occurred to me over the weekend. I was having a great chat with Paul Andre Gutierrez, Dr. Paul Andre Gutierrez, and he's a very, very committed CNS, has been always. And was reflections about, in general, collaboration and RNO and what we are doing, etc. And then it occurred to me. And I said, I will ask Imagine, that is so immersed with the College of Nurses and with the work related to RNs and CNSs, and to a certain extent NPs, but I'm talking CNSs. If we have such a crisis in human resources, guys, time to bring CNSs back. Time to bring CNSs as mentors. Time to bring CNSs as, work environment builders. Because we did away, if you remember, 2 decades ago, it started to dwindle down. All those people are still here around. All those people want to give more. So I'm not talking so much about prescribing or not prescribing, although the Premier said that nurses will prescribe, so that hopefully will come. But I'm talking CNSs as builder apps of work environment, as mentors for others, etc., etc. And then nurses and well-being that we launched during the AGM, and we announced new programs there. And actually, Nursing Week, we launched it on the Friday of Nursing Week. It's all one next to the other almost. And in that, You have the reports that we have done, you have the programs that we have announced, and specific programs that in the next few days you will be able to apply related to leadership, related to preceptorship, mentorship, etc. I will not go in details, not to use all the time, but if at the end we have time, we can chat about that. And mental health and addictions, which our colleague Sabrina Merali will be launching in August. We have done tons of work at RNO on mental health and addictions. And that, of course, includes aspects related to nurses and nursing. And that also relates to the crisis in opioids, as you know, and other aspects of mental health and addictions that RNO has been tackling and will come all under once. In leading change, and Susan, I meant to ask you and I didn't, so here you go. But I did put it, I don't know if you noticed in the AGM presentation that I did, that I added on the corner before the leading change, I added the VPGs, right? The VPGs are a way of leading change at RNO. In addition to being on every specific topic, the VPGs in themselves, whether it's VPGs related to work environment, whether it's the evidence in the VPGs are a way of leading change. And then, of course, it comes our leading change toolkit, and it comes all the other aspects on the policy arena that you are well aware that we do. So I think it is critical that we understand that this is not the entire body of work of RNO, but these are areas of foci where we are doing huge, huge, huge amounts of work. So that is a very, very important. Keep it there, please, Susan. So let me talk about the AGM for a minute. The AGM, it was a phenomenal 3-day, 4-day event. As we said with President Morgan that preceded this AGM, and I think Dr. Claudette Holloway, when she concluded the AGM, may this be the last AGM in via Zoom. But hey, we said that last time, but this time we are going to hold COVID to task, and we will make sure that it's the last AGM via Zoom. Nonetheless, we didn't miss, we didn't miss the pulse at all. We did have the Premier attending the AGM, was his first and only a public appearance since he won the elections on Friday. As you know, or you may not know, the cabinet and the Premier will be at Queen's Park sworn in. And we also had representatives from the other 3 parties. Mike Schreiner came himself, the leader of the Green Party, and for the NDP and for the Liberal Party, as you know, a leader, Andrea Orbath, won her riding, but lost in the sense the capacity of increasing the seats, or as she wanted to win the elections. She's from the NDP came Peggy Stetler, a very good friend of RNO from London. And on the Liberal side, Mr. Del Duca did not win his riding, and he also resigned. Both of them resigned, Andrea and Steve. And John Fraser, who is a tremendous friend of RNO from Ottawa, came to be with us. I want to comment briefly about, and I want to put it in context, but I like to speak very transparently about these topics. Some of the reactions, I can count them in one hand, probably, post AGM, of a few very upset that in their view, we gave the red carpet to the Premier, we accepted the Premier to come. I need to say to colleagues, and when I say I'm speaking on behalf of our executive, Dr. Claudette Holloway, the new the president, and Morgan Orford, our outgoing president, and the board at large, we work with all parties. And people need and must understand that that's Areneo, and Areneo has no intent of changing it. It has served the association well. We treat everybody with respect. And if there is any indication that the premier came to Areneo and has been the only appearance that he has done publicly, well, if that doesn't send you the message that respect brings respect, and I do hope that we will be able to move agendas. Will we move everything that Areneo wants or dreams? No. Would we have moved with other parties everything that Areneo wants or wishes? Let me tell you, I have worked with other premiers. The answer is no. Will we have an easy time? We never have an easy time, nor do we look for an easy time. We look for results. We look for dialogue. We look for building up, not down. We look for also building our colleagues up and not down. And we build on the title that Susan very apropos put to this presentation. Together, let's do it together, because together we can push a lot more than divided. Will it be easy? No, it will not be easy, because in our view, it will take a good 3 to 4 years to recover from the pandemic, to recover from this crisis that the world finds itself in. Would we have had lesser of a crisis if we didn't have Bill 124? Absolutely, we would have had lesser of a crisis, and that's why Areneo was in the streets, in the Twitter, with campaigns, and will continue. And we will keep going. So move to the next one, Susan, and then maybe let's stop at the previous one, Susan, just for a minute, in case people have comments, questions. I would like people to be able to comment or question anything that comes to your mind. Do not please ever feel that you cannot say or ask what's in your mind, because I want to have the opportunity to answer directly on behalf of our executive. And then, of course, if Claudette and Morgan are here, I'm sure they will want to.
Doris, there's a question from Sarah in the chat box. How many years before we recover?
I think, in my view, 3 to 4 minimum. We will know very quickly. We will know very quickly if measures are taken to convey whether it's repeal of Bill 124 or whether it's other measures, because I cannot bet on what will be that the government will be deciding. All I can tell you is I will be meeting with the premier. That's absolutely yes, and he already said the same, and me too. If the answer to those meetings, which I am very hopeful that it will be, is to put the necessary strategies in place to start the recovery, Susan, then I think probably 2.5 to 3.5 years. If not, it may take way longer. People first, what we need is to stop the bleed, stop the exodus, stop the lack of hope that people feel. And then we do have, and we need to remind people, because I have spoken with chief nurses, and even chief nurses in hospitals don't have all the information, which brings me to the point that we need to write not just one-pagers of backgrounders, but succinct Reader Digest type of thing, because people are very busy. The reality is that we do have 35% increase in people that applied. It's not they're saying they will apply. People that applied to baccalaureate education, 35% increase. That's huge increase. So what we have is this, right? On one hand, people are leaving or saying they will leave. On another one, people that want to come. What we want is this to stay still. No more people leaving, or no more than the usual. Every year before the pandemic, we had the 3.5 to 4%. It's just that now is 4 times more at least what people say, and I think what's happening, if not more. And it's not getting better because when we did the comparative analysis, it's worse than the previous year. So we need to stop this, and then we need to take this, right? And then the INs, and then if we can do, it's almost like a shock to the system that we need. The same shock that we had at the beginning, which was a difficult shock with the pandemic. We need a shock, a booster of stopping the bleed, and then bringing fast more RNs, more RPNs, more NPs, more CNSs, I will say, absolutely yes, and build our profession and build it up better. Build it back better, because we have done, for those of us that are long in the profession, it's like a tap water, right? So when it starts to be bad, we act. And then again, we go. It happened, with all the respect, and he, to this day, is close to me, even with Premier McGuinty. So on the first round of Premier McGuinty, he took the 70% like a mantra. And look how good we are doing to this day with that, 70% full time. And then he took the more RNs. If you remember, some of you were with us at the time, you will remember that they put money to the small hospitals to bring more RNs. They put money to the big hospitals to bring more RNs. George Smitherland was going around talking about more RNs, and we did it. But then as soon as we were doing better, it stopped. It stopped. It cannot stop again until we reach stability. My diagnosis for nursing today is, whether here or in other countries, is an unstable profession. And that's the biggest danger. When a person feels instability or a profession feels instability, it's kind of start to look around, right? So that is the issue that we need to fix. So I hope it helps.
Thank you, Doris. I don't see any more questions right now. Judith just wrote that there are more applications, but not necessarily more educational spots. So
that, let me respond to that.
Sure.
Absolutely, she's right. So first of all, the good news is that both the colleges and the universities both have expressed to the Premier's office and to the powers to be in government that they can take more applicants. That's number one. Number two is that we need to convince the Premier and the new Minister of Education of colleges and universities that the funding needs to go for more seats. So you are completely right. We need the funding to increase the seats. And we need the funding to increase the seats for baccalaureate entry. We also need more and more bridging programs, because also more RPNs is good. And then if the RPNs have bridging programs to RN, right? And the RNs can then also move to CNS or to NPs. What we need, what will make us a winning team in Ontario, is to build careers for nurses in Ontario. To build careers for nurses in Ontario.
Thank you, Doris. I'm not seeing any other questions, so maybe we'll move into the programs, if that's okay.
Fantastic. And I will very briefly speak about that, unless all my colleagues that work on developing these programs, I don't know how we are doing with time, Susan, or I go very quickly through them.
Maybe we'll do a, I apologize. Maybe we'll do a high-level overview at this stage.
Very good.
And then,
very,
yeah.
Very good. So we have the Advanced Clinical Practice Fellowship for Nurses program. What we have done, remember, we had ACPF before. What we have done with this program is go back to the in focus, right? And we have tailored specific programs. We have done one that is for leadership and change leadership, where you can use the toolkit, where you can do what you did before, et cetera, et cetera. Then we have one that is targeted to Black nurse colleagues. Then we have one targeted for Indigenous nurse colleagues, and for equity, all the area of health equity, right? So together we continue to learn. I did say before, Susan, and I want to go back for a minute so I don't forget that I left in the parking lot the nurses and health equity. Let me go back to it for a minute. And I want all of you that are attending, 64 people we have here, to be attentive to this. It's the easy way. It's the easy way to go and slap anyone that makes mistakes. A colleague that speaks wrongly about A, B, C, D, F, G. And while we must respond, because RNO must respond, I also think that we as an association need to be mindful that no other association is tackling the issues the way we are. So, I haven't heard, and maybe it's happening and I just haven't heard, whether it's OHA, OMA, WRPN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I attend many of the events of colleagues in other associations, and also I am in the group of associations, which is all the regulated professions, right? So they never get attacked, right? Well, is that what we want? Or do we want to continue to go in the path of learning? And yes, from time to time, whether it's members, whether it's colleagues, whether it's one of us, will make significant boo-boos. And we need to together continue to learn. Together continue to learn, because we don't want people to start to retrieve, right? And then other associations don't do enough. So will we ever not make mistakes, whether it's one of us, or whether it's a colleague, or whether it's a board member, or whether it's a staff, or whether it's an assembly? Will we, I will hope, unintentionally hurt people, because comments hurt people, right? I cannot say for RNO or any of the almost 49,000 members, however we will have by end of October, likely 50,000. No, but I do want to refer to the resolution 5, and people can look by themselves. 79% of people passed that resolution. I cannot say that if OHA or others or OMA would have put a resolution like that, would have been 79 people that passed the resolution. Would we have wanted 100% of people? Of course. But like Rachel, and I don't know if Rachel is here today, our colleague Rachel Radwick says, and I said the same the other day, my gosh, if it was 100% passed the resolution, we would be doing fantastic. But we are not. This country is not doing fantastic. We are all on the path of learning reconciliation. And for that, we need to learn and self-learn, and not just self-learn, also develop the systems in our organizations to educate, to support the learning of others related to truth. There is no reconciliation without understanding the truth. And we are so far away still from understanding and learning and reflecting on the truth. So I say this because I don't want any of our 65 people attending or others that will hear the webcast to refrain from getting engaged, to refrain from speaking, to refrain for fear of, did I say the wrong thing? Well, let's try not to say, me too, all of us. But, if we fall, we apologize and we keep going, right? And we keep going. And I think that's the way to do it. Again, I will stop for a minute, Susan. I just wanted to mention, because I was reflecting, right? How come other organizations don't get, well, because they're not doing a lot, right?
Thank you, Doris. I think maybe we might need a bit more clarification about what the resolution 5 was, just to provide a bit of context. Someone is asking in the chat box, maybe a bit unclear about what you're referring to.
I think people can review it. It's on the website, and because they need to hear, they need to read it. I don't
Sure.
want to not make justice to it.
Okay.
It is in our carousel, it's in the website.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions right now. So maybe what we'll do is just finish up with some of the new programs.
Very good. So the second program, Leadership and Management for Nurses program. This is new. And this is a program that will have modules and also guided discussions. This is a program that will start with long-term care and hospital care in 2022, and is free of charge. And in 2023, it will move to primary care and all of community care. And it will be several modules, and it's excellent, and people are registering already, and I hear we will not have spots already, but we will make more spots. So that's the second program. All of them are free of charge. In the Advanced Clinical Fellowship, in fact, organizations get funding from us to free up a nurse. The Leadership and Management, they need to get the time from the organization, but the program is free of charge. Mentorship for Nurses program. The Mentorship for Nurses program will expand across several sectors. It is right now a mentorship program for colleagues in long-term care. And it is a program also that the interest groups of RNO, which are many, are looking to work with the membership and with Heather and others to do mentorship related to specific areas. The NPs already have a mentorship program for nurse practitioners, and we expect to expand it for all areas, and matching people to be able to be mentored. In relationship to the nursing students and preceptorships in long-term care, we will give funding to nursing homes for developing specific preceptorship programs in their homes, and for nursing students to have a terrific experience in LTC. And hopefully this will also help to bring up the perception that, how did Morgan put it on Saturday, that LTC is if you don't go somewhere else or you don't get somewhere else. No, but that LTC is a priority area for new graduates in long-term care. And it will engage not only the last year of nursing school, but also in each semester a bit, so that really they get both the hands-on experience of LTC as well as the call it management, mentorship, leadership of supervising cadres, etc. So that's in a nutshell the 4 programs, and they're all on the website. They're all well described on the website, and please visit that and see the website and register, or tell colleagues that are interested to register.
Thank you, Doris. And you did speak to the AGM a little bit, but here's a slide that highlights some of the wonderful aspects of the events.
Yeah, well, I want to highlight the one that you have with the 3 students there. My gosh, it was fantastic. That was the student dinner, so to speak, virtual dinner. They had prepared so beautifully on how the situation for students, for graduating students and students coming out of the pandemic. Their presentations were hopeful. They also showed the challenges ahead and during the pandemic, and they were tremendous. They were both in the delivery and also in answering the questions, as well as it was very, very obvious that they prepared tremendously in advance of the presentation. And again, that was taped and it is in the website, so you are welcome to visit it. And then the Saturday, I think the Saturday was a treat. The Saturday basically was, put it around the word courage, because that's how I approach having these colleagues on the panel. I thought about people that from different perspectives and for different reasons have shown very evident courage in the way they have either behaved in the last 2.5 years during the pandemic, or what they have stood for, etc., etc., etc. So needless to say, I'm looking at the comments of some of the people there. Morgan, I don't need to tell you, she moved during the pandemic at the heat of long-term care first wave. She moved from a secure position in hospital to long-term care. Courage personified. If you look at Maycat, well, Maycat breathes and lives courage. She has worked with indigenous communities for always, lived there. She has fought all the issue of from opioids crisis to substance use of other types to suicides of very, very young people. And she never ceases to inspire us. And she didn't this time either. In fact, she offered at the end that people that want to learn more and know more about indigenous life and challenges and wise practices and knowledge to go and be with her. And I will, Vanessa, you know about Vanessa. Vanessa, well, and she was very open and generous of sharing that she actually lost her job at one point. And she even said where, when she spoke about one of our reports. And Vanessa never, ever has ceased to inspire nursing. And I have been experiencing that directly from her in the way that she acts personally, professionally, and in every room and every time you hear her. And Carla, that is perhaps less well known to the nursing community at large. Carla Casey, she is a internationally educated nurse from the Philippines. She is the most humble individual that I know. And my colleague Imogen Bainok also knows, because she also has been very involved with her. And she organized a group of 26 Filipino nurses. And then one day out of the blue, they approached, one of them approached me in a DM, and the rest is history. We became so involved with them. I helping for them to get papers, imagine working with chief nurse officers to get them work, but never, I imagine, I think I can say it with confidence, never did we dream that those colleagues would have five after interviews, not because we asked, 5 offers, right? 5 offers, 6 offers. And this is a group that each one of them will be stars in nursing for the future. I think you know Amek. He's a tremendous member from PIL, and he's a multifaceted member. You haven't seen, I said at the event, and I will say it again without saying more, you haven't seen all from Amek. But Amek is a RN in PIL in public health. He also has a radio station. He also went to the mission with Val Repka and Natalia, and who went in the first round, Nathan, and several others. They went to Poland and ended up both in the Poland and the Ukraine side serving people. A tremendous talent. And Ola, who just, well, no, she didn't yet. She's graduating in September. Again, a leader in nursing that stands her own. That's the way I will put it. Ola has her own compass. She follows her compass, and she's again a watcher, tremendous leader in nursing. And of course, last and not least, our president, Dr. Claudette Holloway, who you have seen her in action. I mean, needless to say what happened at the AGM on the Saturday when Elder Perry had Zoom connections. And I said, okay, Elder Perry cannot join us. I certainly can say a few remarks, or Dr. Holloway, or make out what you like. And then you saw Dr. Holloway going like this, and that's it. She took care, asking permission in a very beautiful way of May, and then moving it back to Maycat, who is indigenous, to add. And between the two of them, it was a beautiful dance that put an amazing closing to the AGM. And that's the way that you will see Dr. Holloway always, very wise, very decisive, very insightful, and a lot to learn, and we will all learn from her. So I think that I didn't forget anyone, I hope, but that was the closing of the Saturday. Well, what I forgot is that we did do the cloud wars, and that was tremendous of how people participated on the cloud. And then we also enabled 12 people to ask questions. And then in the wrap up, the panelists spoke about some of the issues that they raised. I think that was the Saturday. I think that summarizes the AGM a bit, Susan.
Great. Thank you very much, Doris, for providing that great background for the next part of our session. But before we move to Deborah and Jennifer, just wanted to give people an opportunity to ask any questions before we move on. I'm not seeing anything else right now in the chat box, but what you provided is a really nice backdrop and some context for where we're at right now with the pandemic, and where some of the insights that the Nurses Thrive Club have identified. So let me see, nothing in the chat box right now, and I don't see any hands up. So what I would like to do now is warmly welcome our registered nurses who are here today from Nurses Thrive Club, who are going to present, Jennifer Waite and Deborah Lafave. So Jennifer has worked in acute, critical, and transitional care. She is completing her Master's of Nursing Science at Queen's University with a research focus on self-compassion in nursing students. So that's a wonderful topic for your Master's, Jennifer. And Deborah is a trauma-informed nurse who works in acute medicine and mental health. And she returned to bedside nursing 8 years ago, following a rewarding career in senior healthcare leadership. So we're so delighted to have them. Their presentation topic is Embracing Uncertainty Through Our Nursing Stories. And they're going to be talking about how sharing stories can be a very powerful way to embrace uncertainty. And through nursing stories, they've found an opportunity, and I think for all of us, an opportunity not only to grow, but to recapture our purpose, passion, and our ability to persevere. So a big warm welcome, and thank you for joining us, Deborah and Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Susan. So I'm Jennifer Waite, and thank you so much for having Deborah Lafave and myself here today. So just to begin, I'd like to offer warm welcome. And I'd like to begin with acknowledging that the land that Deborah and I are situated on, which is in Kingston, Ontario, is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. And we offer gratitude to the First Nations for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. And may we honor those teachings as we work towards reconciliation. Thank you so much. And so we can move on to the next slide. And briefly, I'll just give a little introduction about myself and my sort of story. I was actually a figure skating teacher for 20 years. So nursing became my second career. And as an older adult, I was experiencing nursing school. I would call it from the perspective of a mother figure. And Deborah was a friend of mine before. She was one of my mentors in nursing. And her example in nursing leadership when she worked on a national maternal child health disease prevention program was a large impact on why I gravitated towards nursing. But ultimately, it was her own personal story, I think, told on Parliament Hill that grabbed my attention and the attention of the national stage. Ultimately, her story resulted in her finding her purpose at the time, but also resonated with so many other people in finding their personal stories within her own. And that's, you know, sort of where we're coming from today on the idea of storytelling. So just quickly to go back during my nursing school undergraduate program while I was 41 years old, I found it traumatizing to find the younger students that I went to school with that were the age of my own oldest son, seeing the emotional impact that nursing school was having on their mental health, you know, and I saw vibrant, smart, hardworking students, you know, struggling through in-class education and then performing within the clinical environment. And I was right alongside of them with that emotional struggle. And was, you know, thinking, well, if I'm having this, you know, epiphany of how my emotions are being impacted at my age when I should have, you know, some control or emotional regulation at this point, I thought, how are they managing? And they, you know, they pushed through their schooling and at the same time, they pushed down their emotions as well as I did as we learned to care for vulnerable individuals. There wasn't a lot of time, as we know in nursing school, to focus on difficult emotions. And as learners, we're learning to offer compassion only to others at that time. And practicing nurses, I believe, feel this, and I know we felt this during the pandemic. It's something that I felt during the pandemic, that our emotions had to be pushed down as we forged through giving compassion to suffering individuals. And the idea of turning compassion inward is not part of our Western culture and not certainly part of even the nursing culture or even within nursing school cultures, you know, to work through those complex emotions. But what Deb and I, and what Deb was able to offer me as a mentor was to share my emotional difficulties with her through nursing school and then onward as we moved through the pandemic. We would take long walks and sometimes joke about how do we even stay in this profession and why? And especially during COVID-19 and onward, now that we're facing this nursing shortage and all these difficult times that we're going through. Deborah and I would talk about what is it that keep people in nursing? And we started to call it, you know, this special sauce. What is the special sauce for this, for these nurses that seem to be able to hang on? And so we began to ask nurses and nursing students about their stories during the pandemic. We wondered how they coped, what their nursing stories included. We know that stories capture passions, in the moment, sufferings and joys, excitements, doubts and fears. And, you know, we searched for meaning through stories. And this is what our quest was. We wanted to know, you know, how do those emerging nurses that have just graduated, how do they hang on? And can we connect through our common humanity to encourage them to keep going? So we developed Nurses Thrive Club. And the idea behind Nurses Thrive Club is to raise voices, to support discussion about emotional health, and to reveal more stories of nurses and nursing students so that we can, start to, feel that connection that may be somewhat lost at times as we're going through these difficulties. And at this point, I'll just pass it over to Deb to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Thank you so much, RNAO, for having us to share this amazing platform. And just building on what Jen was saying, each and every time, whether I was in a leadership role or now at the bedside, stories are a critical component of what we do, whether, we're talking with a colleague, whether it's over the dinner table. And certainly as Jen and I, as she mentioned, we would go on our walks and we would connect with each other in that way. And certainly we know RNAO offers this incredible platform, but Nurses Thrive Club, we wanted to complement that and create this safe space. And so as we collected nurses' stories, so, we approached those that we knew, and then things just began to grow. And the stories that they trusted us with, we began to recognize common elements. And trust me, we have a lot more, because Jen and I both work full-time these days. But Jen is also a single mom and raising 4 children. And her story has been an inspiration to me. And isn't that what it's like though, right? Like we as nurses, we support each other, we care about and for each other, and we connect with each other. So this platform, Nurses Thrive Club, is just another layer in which to connect in a very safe and respectful way. And what Jen and I have done, and what we're going to share with you today, are some of those common elements or themes that you'll see unravel as we spend the next hour together. So as you heard Doris say, we're in a crisis, right? And it's been hard, like so incredibly hard to hold it all together. And there is no doubt as to what we've been through. It's all over the media. Nurses have become more vocal. We're standing up more. We're speaking up more. And for various reasons that we're doing that and feeling safe enough to do that. But what we have found, and if you could move to the next slide, please, is emotional pain is a very common element, a common theme that we've identified in the stories that we've collected. And it's interesting how Jen and I, as we unraveled the words in the stories, how we know about emotional pain and we feel that emotional pain, don't we? But seeing it in words just had taken it to a very different level. And it was just so painfully real to us as to what we as nurses have gone through. And we don't necessarily, like Jen and I didn't say to our colleagues, and even those that reached out to us on our website, tell us about your pain. There wasn't any of that. But it was interesting how the stories had this pain and it was described in the words. And so when Jen and I were talking about that, recognizing that emotional pain is at the core of all that we were reading, we thought, is it something innate? Like we just feel this need to share it. And so the stories became that much more powerful and as a vehicle in which to share what it is that we've been going through. And it's at the core, yes, chronic stress and trauma cause that pain, right? And if left unchecked, if we're unable to share and to care for ourselves and for each other, then it results in poor mental health. And you heard Doris in her opening remarks talk about, you know, the wellness survey. We've seen it in the media, CFNU, Stats Canada. The statistics don't lie. Our mental health was poor before the pandemic and is even more so now. So we, not just as practicing nurses, but also student nurses, the surveys, the studies show poor mental health. And Jen and I, she shared with me a very recent survey by Barnett and Twycross just this year. A meta-analysis shows that our nursing students, 1 out of 2 suffers with depression. So the pandemic has only escalated all that we've known to be true regarding our mental health. And to quote C.S. Lewis, it's not the load that breaks you, it is how you carry it. So if we don't carry it right, that emotional pain can push our limits, can push our ability to cope, and can certainly push our passion and our purpose in nursing.
Thank you, Deb. And so another common theme that we found is the push away from our craft, the push away from nursing, which at some point, I think in every career, there's a feeling of that, do I really want to be here? You know, whatever the factors are. In nursing, we include the core of who we are and the care that we provide, which involves, you know, the emotional part of ourselves, like we were just talking about. And often that can become overwhelming and too heavy. And we saw that during COVID, you know, nurses needed to have leave. Some of them quit, some of them, you know, had to completely go on to maybe a different area of nursing. Sometimes we may not even be able to be conscious of these emotions because we're hardwired to be compassionate caregivers. And we're conditioned to be caregivers right from nursing school. In the stories that we found with these nurses and nursing students, they all spoke about their wounded emotional health, but they also talked about their strategies to embrace their pain. They all felt pushed away from nursing. I have felt pushed away from nursing, I'm not going to lie. Part of the reason why I went back to do my master's was to recapture why I decided to change careers at a later age and go into nursing. So I was holding on as well and trying to find ways to embrace nursing still. You know, so I think at some point we may have all felt that way due to emotional stress or whatever the factors may be. And, you know, nursing students also, you know, find that they're facing burnout at the end of their nursing schooling years, you know, in year 3 and year 4. So they're burning out before they even enter practicing as being a practicing nurse. One of the stories by Haley, she even asked herself, and she wrote, will I be burnt out only 8 months into my career? She was a float nurse who was asked to go into ICU to help out during COVID. And it was traumatic for her. And it was very, you know, I wouldn't say completely negatively impacting her emotions and her mental stability, but she had to really work hard to adapt to find a way to make it through. So she questioned also, what is she doing at only 8 months into her career? I'd like to add that I think some of the push away from nursing can be from clearly our need to offer compassion, but I also think it's because of our lack in understanding of what compassion involves. And I say that because I don't feel that I, you know, had a good grasp on the gravity, the largeness of what compassion entails. And so that became somewhat interesting for me to study during my master's. I wanted to, first of all, I found out that there's not just one description of compassion in nursing, there's several. Well, that makes it a little hard to understand what compassion actually is. And one of the most broad conceptualizations of compassion actually has 5 steps. And so I think that's quite important to point out that, we talk about compassion as the foundation of nursing, but do we know what it is? Do we know how it impacts our health? Do we understand, the multiple steps involved in it? Is it really valued by others, the care that we offer? There's so much around that concept that, boggles me. But when I look at compassion, and I've taken one of the conceptualizations that include 5 steps. So there's a recognizing of suffering, which is the awareness. There is understanding that suffering is a universal human experience, which actually includes self-compassion. There's a feeling of being moved by the suffering of another and connecting emotionally with their distress, which is expressing empathy. So that's called actually an empathetic response. There's tolerating uncomfortable feelings around fear, distress, which involves mindfulness within that moment so that we can remain open to accepting the personal suffering of the other person. And then there's acting and being motivated to alleviate suffering. So, there's a whole lot of whack of, motion, motivation, intentional movement within compassion. But not only that, compassion involves the basis, which we don't recognize so much in our Western society, but it is embraced in Buddhist psychology, which is self-compassion. So that's just part of the push away that I want to describe, is about the compassion. The compassion that we feel can work for us, but it can also work against us. But let's move on to the next slide, and we'll see that the compassion works for us because compassion pulls us back into our profession. And that's what we saw within these stories. I mean, this is a beautiful example. I took this quote and I've never stopped thinking about it. This quote in itself helps me to manage to go back into nursing, when she says that the pandemic is temporary, but the impact she will make on people will be permanent. I mean, she just puts it all right there. And reading her story inspired me to rethink how I see myself as a nurse, why I'm in nursing. It starts to reframe how we look at things. It takes me out of that rut that I'm in, that I feel, that I can be in. So oddly enough, compassion pulls us back into nursing. It has the power to inspire courageous deeds. And it also encourages all sorts of positive behaviors, both individual and societal. So moving on to the next slide. And I just want to mention here that there's a study by Slavich and colleagues, 2021, that found that social belonging, compassion, and kindness are key ingredients for fostering resilience, recovery, and growth from the COVID pandemic. So it's not surprising that we also found the theme of belonging. And, it's funny because this clearly wasn't a research project. It was more of let's just try it out and see what we find. But what we found here relates to what we're seeing in the literature. The up-to-date literature that's being, printed all on nurses and their recovery and their growth from the COVID-19 pandemic. So belonging involves a sense of interpersonal connectedness, and practicing compassion involves perceiving that suffering as a larger shared human experience. So we can see that interconnection right there between belonging and and compassion. And, you know, belonging here with Tori, she talks about it being not only just her friends at work, but also her family. So it's crucial for her family to support her nursing. And if we move on to the next slide, we'll also see here that that Ashley felt the same way, that her family pulled together to help her cope. And at this point, I'll just pass it back to Deb.
Oh, I don't know. You're doing a great job there, Jen. Yeah, so just building on what Jen was saying, the element of compassion. So we, as you see here with Nurse Ashley, she talks about her work family, and at work, she has this strong sense of belonging. So the interpersonal connectedness that nurses feel go into that workplace setting. And it's because of that commonality, because the act of nursing itself, we share, we roll up the sleeves together, we support each other, we never leave our colleague behind. And it's that element of teamwork, if you will. But again, going back to the 5 principles of compassion are so clearly seen in the workplace. That sense of belonging gives a wholeness, brings heart to what we do, and also gives us heart. So pulling us back in so that we do not want to leave our colleagues short. How many times have we been called to come into work to cover for a shift because of this nursing shortage? So this sense of belonging, the compassion, the wanting to support, nurture, care, supports all of us coming together in the best interest of patient care. Next slide, please. So talking about courage, Jen just mentioned that. Courage, it's a big C word, isn't it? We've had to demonstrate tremendous courage to get us through the pandemic. And it gives us the drive. It supports us to show up each and every day, facing that uncertainty that we are seeing in the stories, that we're seeing on a day-to-day basis in the workplace. And what it does, it helps us face that uncertainty, again, looking at the elements of self-compassion and to be present with a colleague during some of the greatest periods of loss and suffering. The stories that we have gathered reflect and personify courage in nursing, particularly during the pandemic. And as Jen and I share the stories with you, someone mentioned, I noted in the chat, about being given the tools to carry that load. It is not a nurse's responsibility alone to make it through, to take care of ourselves and of each other. We'll talk a little bit more about that during the slide on systemic change. I just hope that the individual who mentioned that will be around to hear that moving forward. But looking at Haley, self-compassion is important, especially for nursing students who are incredibly hard on themselves. And you may have heard us say that in the curriculum, this is not being taught. And it is such a challenge to support nursing students when we ourselves are so incredibly stretched and strained to deliver patient care. But that's not to say it can't be done. So self-compassion in itself, the 5 elements, we're not taught that. We don't talk about self-compassion in a big way. It's something that one of the former board members at RNAO, and Doris, you might help me out on this one. She conducted her research for her PhD on the elements of self-compassion and found that the majority of nurses recognize it, and we know it exists, but we don't necessarily talk about it. And we need to learn more about the tools and the ways in which to build it within ourselves. So again, it's not something much like the element of emotional pain in the themes that we've discovered. We didn't intentionally request, what are your thoughts on self-compassion? And yet, like emotional pain, it emerged and it surfaced throughout. And so we captured that and sharing it with you. And again, it's almost like it's innate in us, much like the research. I haven't read the report yet, or it is being published, and Jen and I were talking about it, and so looking forward to reading our colleagues' findings. But it might be innate in us, and it's something that when we feel a threat or we feel we are at risk, it emerges, and it certainly did in the stories. So what does it mean? It means to be kind to ourselves. And as Jen mentioned, it's one of those elements, helping others so that we can maintain our pull, so that we can recapture our passion and our joy in nursing. And it gives us an ability to self-regulate our emotions, because we certainly know our emotions have been pretty wild during the pandemic. It's been a very rocky ride, but self-compassion, if we can harness that, it can really support our sense of purpose in nursing.
So yeah, Deb, I'll step in if that's okay here. So as Deb said, it was surprising, because why it was surprising to see compassion for self, or self-compassion, however you look at it, kind of emerging through these stories, is because in the global literature of self-compassion in undergraduate nursing students, there has not been studies done in Canada on self-compassion in students in the nursing schools. There have not been studies in the United States. So the studies have been elsewhere. So it's quite foreign to our area. Also, a study that was done in the United States, it was a grounded theory methodology used to explore experience of self-compassion in nurses, found that they actually had no understanding of the key concepts of self-compassion, which they were looking at the key concepts developed by Kirsten Neff, who conceptualized self-compassion. But that's interesting, because what I'm trying to sort of highlight here is that it was found as foreign, but yet we are seeing it in different sort of wording within the stories that we have, such as nurses need to cry. We need to feel that we can let our emotions out without the fear of being, reprimanded or told not to. We need to be able to discuss our struggles and not keep them inside. And that's part of self-compassion. It is the mindful recognition of difficult emotions in that moment. And Dr. Neff conceptualizes this self-compassion with 3 elements: mindfulness, which is not the same as mindfulness, as in mindfulness. It's mindfulness focused on difficult emotions, self-kindness versus self-judgment, and common humanity versus isolation. So here again, we're seeing common humanity, which is kind of related to belonging. And so we're seeing sort of a little overlap here in all of this. So just to give you a little highlight here, especially in nursing students and in nurses, studies have shown that nurses and nursing students score very, very high on self-judgment, that self-judgment component, which is the opposite of self-kindness, in studies across the board. So right there, we're seeing that we're very self-critical. We need to learn that inner dialogue, which was one of the comments by one of the nurses here, that it can make or break you. And so, and then there's the other element of common humanity, which is also very low on the scale for nurses and nursing students. And what that tells me, or how I think about it, is that we very quickly feel isolated from our team when we do something wrong, or when we've made a mistake, which is something that actually happens in nursing, believe it or not. We will make mistakes. And that feeling of being isolated from other nurses or other nursing students as we're learning, where we feel like we're the only one that makes mistakes, is very detrimental to our growth in nursing, because it's actually the mistakes that help in our learning. So where we don't want to make huge, massive mistakes, I'm not saying that that's, that's something that we want, but that we have to acknowledge that they can happen, and that that sense of common humanity and team within that moment can cultivate that knowledge that you need as you move forward, that maybe that gap in knowledge, or maybe that lack of mindfulness in that moment. It could be anything. So it's very crucial to take those elements that we're talking about here within this little idea of self-compassion and find a way to bring those, I believe, within our nursing practice, which is something that I've been practicing, when I go in. And it can be something as simple as talking about it on the floor. I mean, it's become a joke at my workplace. Here she comes, Miss Self-Compassion. Everybody talk nicely, but like we actually joke about it and we have fun with it. And, I'm probably the first one they come to when there's fear around, not understanding something or not knowing something, because I would hope that I've created, that open dialogue with my colleagues, that we can, get through this together, and that I'm not perfect, and, we'll all learn. So just a thought there, and we saw it in these stories, and I thought it was quite lovely to see. So if we move on to the next slide. So we're talking about these difficulties, and difficulties seem to occur at the worst of times, which they did within the pandemic. We talk about nurses' struggles. We heard that within the stories, and often the worst times and happen, in the worst places, and in those difficult places, these nurses, and through their stories, commented on learning a lot about themselves and their capabilities and finding their purpose, which, may not be their lifelong purpose, but it was a purpose enough to keep them moving forward through uncertain times. And as we see here, Haley, who was projected into working into the ICU at only a few months into her career, talked about how scared she was. She talked about even having a hospital stay because the stress exacerbated her allergies. She actually ended up having almost an anaphylaxis, and, blew up one night after a shift and ended up having to take an, ambulance in to emerge to resolve her issues. And they said to her, it's, we think this is from stress and you need to take some time. So, despite those struggles, she still is looking at the pandemic as, having some good points that helped her move towards a critical care nursing career. She actually is just finishing her critical care course right now. And if we move to the next slide, I think we find here that Tori also found her purpose in harm reduction. And, she talked about, I had no interest in it. I didn't even think it was for me. I had no clue even what it was about too much until she got into the pandemic. And her story talks about how she ended up totally passionate in harm reduction. And that is where she sees her career now. And she's, you know, totally happy to be in that place. So difficulties, you know, can end up with somewhat of a silver lining is what we're seeing here. And that's what we at least saw in our stories. And I'm not sure what the next slide is, but I think I'll hand this one over to Deb.
Thank you, Jen. So our ability to manage uncertainty. As nurses, we generally, our work environment is uncertain, isn't it? Healthcare in general is uncertain, particularly over the last couple of years, more than ever. And yet our stories, the stories that nurses have trusted us with show that there's the ability to manage the uncertainty. And we've been challenged, as we've known and we've heard today, in so many different ways. And as Jen just pointed out, though, those challenges helped some nurses either reclaim their purpose, their joy, redefine it perhaps, or maintain it for that matter. And that's not all nurses. We're not saying that at all, because we know this, the statistics show us. I'm working in a nursing crisis, and the report by RNAO is nursing through crisis. There is without a doubt our profession is in crisis. But in 5 years, or within 5 years, RNAO Doris shared with us 75% of nurses plan to leave. And that's shocking, but it's also an opportunity.
Just a correction. That's not what I said, and I wouldn't want the record to go wrong.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. 69% of nurses are saying they will change positions. That doesn't mean leave.
Oh, positions. I'm sorry.
Although Deborah, there are reports, not from here, from other parts, that show even worse. So the situation is dire across the world.
Thank you.
And if we don't do something, you bet we will get to that 75%, if not more even.
I stand corrected.
No, but
69% may change their position.
Change position. Imagine, right? The revolving door.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't find peace of mind here. I cannot do it here. Maybe in the next unit I will. And then maybe in the next unit. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Doris. That's an important correction.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I'm getting the 75% from, but probably some report that Jen and I have reviewed. Not sure.
On the burnout, because that is the number for burnout.
Okay, thank you.
And that's heavy, right?
That's very heavy. And that can lead to a significant loss in nurses. But again, we have an opportunity.
And to depression, talking about Jennifer's and your point, right?
Yes.
To depression and other situations that.
Yeah. Thank you, Doris. So yes, we're under a lot of pressure as nurse professionals and certainly nursing students. We heard some earlier about, the statistics about one in two are living with depression at some level of depression. But despite what we've been through, we're seeing, as Doris had mentioned, an increase of 35% in applications to nursing programs. So, and as Jen mentioned with the previous slides, there are some silver linings to what we have been through. Next slide, please. As we're seeing here with Jessica, I'm not going to pretend, some healthcare leaders just very recently in the media, power and politics are signaling that our healthcare system is collapsing, on the verge of collapse. And again, that can mean opportunity, and perhaps it needed to collapse. It needs to collapse in order to fix it. in order to make positive change. The themes, if we could have the next slide, please. The themes that we have identified: recognizing emotional pain, push and pull, belonging, courage and compassion for self, and finding purpose. These are not linear. We can rest in one and go back and forth and in between. But the result is, for nurses, is whether conscious or not, nurses are trying to find some meaning in their work and what we've been through. And we're seeing that in the stories. And some nurses look at the bright side, some leave and change positions, as we're hearing, 69% or so in the next 5 years. Some have already done so. Some offer compassion and support to their colleagues, and they reach out to their peers, and they emerge, as Jen has mentioned. She is, the nurse with the compassion, the heart to support and care for others that she's working with. And maybe that's you on your unit. Whatever and however it's impacted you, the stories are showing us that nurses are being pulled back to reclaim their purpose and their joy. And we're seeing that again with the applications to nursing. Many factors can influence where we land. We heard Doris mentioned, what was it, 2.5, 3.5, or 3 to 4 years for recovery. And what's going to take us there? And it's not nurse professionals alone. That is certainly the furthest from the truth. There are so many, and next slide, please. There are so many things that need to happen, systemic change, to help us recover. Doris mentioned Bill 124. That is a policy issue that needs to be addressed. And I know RNAO and other organizations were working to address this, with government. Leadership, hospital leadership, availability of leaders to nurses, and the way in which we as nurse professionals and students are treated with compassion and empathy. And if you look at the nursing through crisis,
if I may add one thing, Deborah,
of course,
because putting the parking lot, and we should look at that at some point again. I think that this is very different. This 2.5 years is very different than anything in the past. And we went through the 90s, you may remember, because you were in the system, so was I. The comments, and you and I spoke in the middle of this pandemic without going in detail. You experienced that in from one of the colleagues that shared with you, of you're replaceable. You don't like it, you're replaceable. Cannot be more detrimental. We had that in the 90s. The difference is the 90s, when we had either the health system restructuring or during SARS, was a short period. Here is a long period. Mm-hmm. I still to this day believe that these nurses ongoingly and other health professionals would have been treated in a silver plate during this pandemic. The results would have been different in the way people feel.
Absolutely.
So I think we need to reclaim that peace and never let it happen again, because this repeats the story. This repeats the story.
Yeah.
Except that it was tragic when it was stated back then. That was a short period versus during a long period.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, bang on, Doris. Jen and I, when we look at how do we recover all of that, and of course, recognizing that we've been through a very, very difficult time, and we're still in, nursing through crisis, and we need the organizational support, We need governmental support. We need more investment. We need a chief nursing officer. We just need so much mental health resources and supports to help us recover. I'm sorry, you're hearing my dog. I have a 10-year-old German Shepherd, and he's giving me the, you know what time it is. He knows when I'm at home. It's incredible how smart they are. But Jen, do you have any other thoughts to add before we turn it over to Q&A, please?
The only thing that I've questioned, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is what would happen if we developed our culture solely on self-compassion?
Terrible.
It would be
Terrible.
You know
Because I tell you why, Jennifer. And Jennifer, self-compassion, you have been reading a lot, right? Has to do with emotional intelligence also. But it relies on the person, right? It relies on the person. And then if your manager, or if your colleagues, or if your family, or if you are whoever, right, doesn't get it, it's like, you know.
That's what I mean. It should be. It should be.
That is important, plus all the rest, the systemic structures that need to support. One of the colleagues wrote in the chat that is linked to being a female profession, in part, and so does the rest, caring, and so does this. You know, one of you said, I think you, Jennifer, that we are wired like this.
Mm-hmm.
We are wired like this as women too. Women care, right? It's a given, but we ain't going to change that too fast. And I think maybe we need to leverage on that and turn it upside down. Maybe we need to leverage that women care, and today more and more, quite frankly, men care too, I would suggest.
Yes.
That we need to turn it upside down, that's what the system needs, because the entire system is in a mess, Jennifer. Partially because we are in such a trouble, and we are the great majority of the system. But even if you took our big problem and crisis, I think the system still is in crisis. I speak with other professionals, whether it is physio, whether it is RTs, whether it is lab technicians. So how about if we turn it upside down to being a core of the system? Self-compassion and collective compassion, right? And collective support for it.
But you know, and I hear what you're saying, but if I heard Jennifer correctly as I walked out of the room, the question was, what if we had, what was it, a system build into curriculum more self-compassion and awareness? Was that correct, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, like the idea of self-compassion isn't to promote being wimpy.
Exactly.
It's actually what it promotes is it promotes more of a life work balance, in that nurses could say no, because they would say no if it was going to hurt their mental health or their emotional health. They would just have the courage to say no. And so self-compassion has that like, people, sometimes it's seen as, you know, creating sort of a self-loathing type, you know, way about someone, but it's actually more courageous. It teaches, it cultivates and fosters that ability for somebody to say, put up their boundaries and say, no, I will not do that. I will not stay for 4 extra hours tonight. I need to go home and rest. I can't make a good decision right now for the patient's health. I need to take care of me. And
that starts with, again, structural changes at the college.
Absolutely.
You say no if you're not there, and nurses are saying it, right?
Yeah.
Nurses turn the phone. They leave the shift and they tell me, rightfully so, they turn the phone because 20 minutes after they left the shift, they're getting a call if not.
Yeah.
But if
And
you are
you know-
there and they tell you, I need you to stay, right? That's different
Yeah.
because.
You know, before we turn it over to Q&A, Susan, I just wanted to say that in the Nursing Through Crisis report, one thing that really stood out for Jen and myself, and reflecting on the stories, and even in Jen's opening remarks, was the issue of the mentorship program. That is a fantastic program that is so desperately needed, so that, you know, we and hopefully learning more about self-compassion and just building on what Jen is saying, be there for nurses that need the mentoring, and to be there to hear their stories and to care and support and nurture. We have a lot of work to do, clearly, and just building on what Doris said in her presentation earlier, is we have a lot of learning to do at all levels, in all organizations, in all systems, and hopefully that learning and work will take us to a better workplace and a better healthcare system and healthier public policy. Thank you so much. This has been amazing.
That was an amazing
Thank you so
presentation.
much.
Someone wrote in the chat, in addition to it, that there is so many cultures in nursing, right? And there is both cultures in terms of cultures, but both cultures in terms of cohorts, right? Different cohorts. So yeah, learning all together from one another and from the collective, right? Because there is no one cookie cutter, and we will need to learn what probably a buffet of different opportunities that will help people overall recover, right?
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Well, if not now, when?
That's right.
Susan, you want to lead us through questions?
Sure, thank you. Well, I just want to thank Jennifer and Deborah so much for sharing the findings of these themes. I think that it's resonating with a lot of people. I'll provide a bit of a summary, but I wanted to invite people to raise their hand. We've got about 10 minutes left. So to raise their hand if they do want to speak or ask any questions in the remaining time. I invite everyone to take a look at the chat box. It's got some really interesting points. I'm seeing one theme, just people agreeing the value and importance of belonging, the need for support, having strong relationships with colleagues and good friends to speak freely. So obviously that theme is really important for people on the line. And then also some thoughts around this self-judgment and criticism, that maybe that's kind of part of our weekly training in nursing school, the weekly self-assessment, when you look at areas for improvement. And then Victoria asked a question on that theme, I think, of self-judgment and criticism. Are the loads that we carry and are told that we need to accept no matter what, maybe that is part of the issue with self-criticism. So I'll leave you with that one question, and then I'll look through the chat box to see if I missed anything else that's key. And a reminder to people that they can put up their hands if they want.
I would like to repeat what Deb said in inviting people to tell their stories. And I wonder if in the future, Deb and Jennifer, ask them also to tell if people that are not big novice in the profession, if the stories have changed. You know what I mean? If this experience with this brutal, intense pandemic of 2.5 years is different than other experiences that we all have had. I can only speak for where I sit, and I can tell you it's different. I work in a war, and I didn't end up with the burnout of now, right? In terms of the intensity of the length of this, the intensity of the length and intensity of not expressing what you're going through because what the other person is going through is more difficult. We kept talking about that with our own stuff about that. We are privileged where we are. So the others are in the front lines more difficult. And everybody does, I feel, kind of similar, right? And it's the length and intensity. And I wonder if when you ask in the future, just ask if it's different and how. Because we need to, for coming out of it will be important.
Mm-hmm.
I see a question from Shelley. She's a new grad and she's asking what amount of mentoring should be expected at a first job?
Well, that's a really loaded question. If it was me, I would say I would expect loads of mentoring. But of course, each unit, each team of nurses is different. But I think it's an issue that we are promoting a lot at my place of work, and we recognize the value of it. Ask the question. If I was a new grad, I would ask that question and determine how much the organization values mentoring in the workplace, because honestly, was it Shelley, Susan, who asked the question?
Yes, and she just confirmed that it's not her who's a new grad, but her friend's son.
Okay,
yeah.
So Shelley, just letting your friend know that I think asking that question in the organization, because mentoring is something that really needs to be valued by leadership. And as most things, that work culture can honestly be top down. So ask the question. And if I was a new grad today, I would expect it. And certainly with RNAO's nursing mentorship program, you know, it's being promoted and supported through various associations. Is there anything to add to that? Doris, perhaps?
I think so. This is why we are pushing so much a few things at RNAO. One is that we're pushing and discussing with government that they bring back recently retired nurses, you know, that for 3 years to serve as mentors, because the nurses that are already in the workforce simply cannot take anymore. They're stretched like thin. So that's one thing. The other is the mentorship program that we are developing. The bottom line, I don't think that there is a standard answer for that either. And I think the question is very appropriate, number one. Number two, don't stop asking it. Number three, if at any point, whether it's now, remember, mentorship may be needed if you shift from one position to another, from one unit to another. You may not be a novice nurse, new grad, but the new role or the new unit, you need mentorship. And never give up on that. I can say from my own experience, because I moved countries and I was an experienced nurse. Never give up on asking that. And always you will find, and the person you find is the right person because they're eager to be a mentor. Always you will find, bottom line, look at Jennifer and Deborah. They just spoke about that. Always you will find other people willing to do that. I know because Ola is one example. Ola is graduating in September. She's already serving as mentor to another younger student. You know what I mean? Yes. And there is no perfect mentor. You study, you learn from those that are, every person can give you mentorship on something else. That's the other thing. Don't think you need to find a mentor for everything. One is for clinical issues. One is for emotional care of yourself. Please don't ever stop asking that and trying to secure a mentor. I think going back to what Deb says, if you're looking at a workplace, that's a good question for you to ask in the interview. You know, what type of mentorship will be available? What are the opportunities? Ask those things. You are, I hate this, but it's so true. You are in the market driven now. We are short everywhere. You are going to have so many offers. Be picky on what you choose. Choose the place that fits right, not only for your head, but for your heart and your stomach. Fill with the stomach. That would be my answer. And if in doubt, you can always connect with Deborah, with Jennifer, with me, with Susan, with all of us here, and we can also help.
You know, Jen and I are very hopeful. And thank you, Doris, so much for adding to that. Jen and I are very hopeful, like the overall idea, looking at the stories. And as Jen mentioned, this is not research, but we feel that the themes that have emerged are, and Jen would agree because we talked about this, that they're worthy of consideration by not only nursing curriculum, but also within organizations, because they're common. And judging by what I'm reading here in the chat as well, and certainly reflective in RNAO's work. So I do hope that people will send in their stories to us. We treat every story with the utmost respect, and we do not publish anything without running it by. We make no edits unless the author approves. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
And we have several that we're just starting to put together. Right now, we have quite a few more that we're going to be putting onto the website, but we do have a goal that we'd like to have at least 100 stories within the next 6 months, so that we can really start to see what's out there. So we'll be, working very quickly and hopefully for these stories to come in. And we offer, the stories to come from people on their own, or that we would interview, and, clearly not to be, overly guiding the interview, but that we would transcribe everything verbatim, and then the interviewee can go through their story and craft what they want to keep in and what they don't. And we make sure that we're very mindful about anything that could possibly, not be something that that they might not want to tell. There's always those things that, we can open up to another person, and we're pretty mindful about being, very careful about, what goes in, but that the story still stays authentic. So.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. So maybe one more time, Deborah or Jen, you could put the link to your Nurses Thrive Club in the chat, and just reiterate. So you are looking to collect 100 stories, and these are mainly from nurses directly from RNs or nurses in Ontario, or is there anything else that you want to say about the target audience before we move on to closing remarks from Doris? And just also wanting to point you in the chat that there's lots and lots of gratitude for what you've shared today. It's been helpful for so many people. So just one last offer to say a bit more about your recruitment, and then we'll move to closing remarks.
So we're looking for stories from nursing students, RPNs, RNs. We've had 2 stories come in, one from BC, one from Alberta. So we're looking, sort of on a national scope, but that we're also, wanting to know, and we're keeping those, we can even separate, our provinces once we get them all in, nurses from certain provinces. But, we're looking, in speaking about mentorship, we're looking at these stories as hopeful stories for nursing students to read and see themselves in a future nurse, as a future nurse through these stories. So in a roundabout way, it's not clearly one-on-one mentorship, but it is sort of a passive way to offer some mentorship. Some people don't want to talk. Some people just want to read about it and formulate their own ideas. So yeah, we're looking, you know, on sort of a larger scale. Maybe down the road, we'll even look at international stories. So
Thank you.
And to add as well, nurse practitioners and doctorates, certainly. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to just turn things over to Doris for some final closing remarks, and also just point us to what's happening tomorrow with National Indigenous Peoples Day. And we've got a video that we'd like to close off. So I'll turn things over to you, Doris.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, a huge thank you to Jennifer and Deborah. Excellent presentation. I just want to be very, very clear on two things. One is that this is not a program that RNO is endorsing, just so we don't get flagged from other people. We thought that this is a tremendous opportunity for people to hear a good program of two colleagues that work very beautifully with RNO and that will share. I would encourage you, Jennifer and Deborah, it does not need to be a research study to be published. And I would strongly encourage you that you find a venue to publish it. I think it will be tremendous value to nursing. And not all studies are published. Also, you are linked to Kingston University, to Queens. So, you know, now you have done a good piece of it. And if you need help, we can help you. I would encourage you to actually move into a second phase, which is research on it. And here you go, Jennifer, that's your PhD, because you're finishing the master. So that's that. I think it's a tremendous baseline for really doing something else with it. And we are not done. We're so not done, guys. You know what I mean? And if you could, for example, take this, and we can talk offline. I love research, as you know. If you could connect this to people at least in cohorts that were there for SARS, for example, or were there, how is this different? Because I'm convinced, and I haven't seen nothing written about this on that piece. On this, I have also on students, Jennifer, there has been studies written in the past about emotional intelligence vis-a-vis self-compassion and teaching it, etc. There is nothing. And if someone finds, show me, because I'm so eager to find that compares what happened in previous situation. Or nurses, for example, in war-stricken zones, because they keep going, right? They keep going. How is it that they keep going? And in our situation with COVID, it's different, and I cannot pinpoint except of the intensity and length. But that will be a tremendous challenge, and maybe we can do something together. But it's important work that you're doing, and the stories are tremendously valuable. And I think they're valuable not only from the point of view of your findings, they're valuable to people. When we did the Nursing Through Crisis report, I don't remember how many hundreds of pages of people that wrote comments. So people feel that they want to tell their stories, right? There are two sides to it. One is how we analyze all that. The second is how do we prevent people from feeling that they're telling their stories, but what's the answer? How are you going to help me on my particular story, right? So we would love to continue the conversation, and we open the door to chat with you about that amazing work. I'm just beyond impressed. Thank you for sharing. And Miigwech for sharing, talking about stories. You all know that stories have much to do with truth and reconciliation and the work of indigenous peoples. There is much happening. I'm not going to go into any level of detail because it's not the place, but there is much happening nationally as we speak with very challenging situations that you may or may not be aware, related to First Nations and challenges that we are following closely to see how they get resolved. It's not our place to get involved in resolving them, of course, but it's important for us to be aware. As you know, RNO has a close relationship with Chief Archibald from back then when she was in Ontario. So we are our heart is following what's happening. We do work with tremendous Indigenous communities on the VPSOs. We have, in fact, in addition to the VPSO directs, we have the first, hopefully of many, VPSO, Indigenous focus VPSO OHTs. And also we have the first guideline that we release. And we are learning so very much. And we know we will continue to learn. More than what we will contribute, despite that our colleagues say we contribute, we will learn from our Indigenous peoples in VPSOs directs, in doing new guidelines, and in the VPSO HT. So we want to share with you a video that was done by Northern Lights Services, Mr. Bernie, and also a song was done by an Indigenous colleague. We will leave you to hear it, and you will see this tremendous documentary or video, or however we want to call the artistic creation. You will see it alongside the words of our VPSOs. So Susan, take it, please, or Olivia is putting it. Did I lose Olivia or Susan? Maybe. Let me. Susan, are you putting the video, or is Olivia or is Raul who is putting it? You're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I was showing it and I thought that it was working because I didn't hear anything. So maybe
No.
I need to get Olivia to take over. Let me stop.
If Raul is there, then if not, he can help. I don't know if Raul is here or not. Let me call him. Olivia, why don't you try? And then if it doesn't work, I can ask Raul. You need to put the mute. You need to put the sound before you. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, my name is Greta Mikas from Sandy Lake, Ontario, and I am the lead of Sandy Lake First Nation Indigenous Focused VPSO.
Oh, my name is Genevieve Catalan. I'm the pre and postnatal registered nurse coordinator at Anishinaabe Mushkiki in Thunder Bay.
So my name is Kyle Langlois. I'm a registered practical nurse. I work here at Anishinaabe Mushkiki. I am the mental wellness coordinator.
My name is Paige Fenlon. I'm a registered nurse with Mamaway Weedop Dadwin, and we are an interprofessional primary care team that services the Simcoe-Muskoka region, and our services are available to people who identify as First Nation, Métis, and Inuit.
Hello, my name is Cassandra Forget, and I am the BPSO lead here at Chegamek Community Health Center.
Chegamek is an Ojibwe word meaning the people's place. The name reflects our commitment to provide a place where all members of the community are welcome and where services reflect the diversity of our community.
My name is Glenn Chenard. I'm a registered nurse and clinical manager at Chigami Community Health Center.
My name is Jessica Taboni. I am the health policy analyst for the Ontario Native Women's Association, and I'm also the BPSO project lead.
Hi everyone, my name is Christina Ortolan, and I am the community development manager of health programs in the Des Moines Health Clinic. We have 11 sites, 11 chapters, and I think 21 councils within Ontario.
Hi, my name is Samara Anderson, and I am the Indigenous Diabetes Education Coordinator here at ONWA.
Anine, hello. My name is Odamon McKay Losher. I'm an Anishinaabe registered midwife here at 7th Generation Midwives Toronto, and I am the BPSO lead.
My name is Kate McDonald. I'm a non-Indigenous settler midwife here at 7th Generation, and I've been here for about 3 years now, and I'm one of the co-leads with the BPSO.
I would encourage all people that are working with RNAO BPSO to include themselves, involve themselves with all knowledge exchange groups, become a champion. It opens doors for you.
We're not just the teachers and we're not just the learners. Those things go hand in hand. We learn by doing and being involved.
We have some elders actually on the calls often. They're a great source of encouragement, wisdom. Also, joining in on those champion workshops is super helpful.
We found as we were starting up as a clinic that a lot of the healthcare that's available in the area is very Western focused and doesn't take into account the traditional ways of our Indigenous people and the holistic way that they live their lives. And we thought it was important that the care that we're providing and that we're offering reflects their needs the most.
The RNAO BPSO designation is a widely recognized mark of quality and commitment to evidence-based care provision, one that every member of our team can take pride in helping to achieve and to live out in day-to-day practice.
Through implementing the RNAO best practice guidelines for perinatal Indigenous women, we've been able to ensure that nobody fell through the cracks. Clients and community members have access to culturally relevant, holistic programs and services within a respectful and inclusive environment.
And we are also looking forward to being a part of the next BPSO stage as a designation.
Part of the draw to the best practice guidelines in the BPSO program is being able to build that relationship with the mainstream healthcare system through the RNAO and be able to both kind of standardize some of our practices while also looking to inform nursing best practices based on what we know over the past 50 years of our organization.
Some of the things that we are really proud of is the collaboration that we did as within an organization. It brought a lot of files together and helped build a really strong health file. And the fact that we were able to take this best practice and roll it out within our organization first in a good way. So we approached our staff for feedback, for focus groups. We brought in elders to help us. We did some like traditional naming and got advice from like a forum of people. And I think that that really helped us be successful. And to start having those difficult conversations. Like not a lot of people like to talk about that. And now we're doing it within all of our programs.
Something unique we aim to achieve with the BPSO work is the opportunity to have a community level impact by supporting whole families rather than just the pregnant person. Also, the idea of working with and learning from an interdisciplinary group that we more often just work in parallel with is a great opportunity.
We're really able to think critically about what we're doing well and where we can make changes to better provide to the community. The project that we're really excited about is incorporating nicotine replacement therapy into our clinic, which is something we don't currently do. And I think it's something that can really make a big impact pretty quickly in our community here.
Be creative, think out of the box. That's what we had to do when we approached this, and it worked really well.
Adjust and pivot when you need to make it make sense for you and your context.
I feel that where Sandy Lake is proof anybody can do it. Anybody can accomplish. And I hope we continue to move forward.
David Ronald, the lyrics music. Absolutely beautiful, meaningful. And as I answer to Deb's comments, we are learning so much. And I think we will continue to learn forever. That's the truth. If we didn't, then we wouldn't be in where we are, right? This country as a whole and nursing in particular. And if RNO can play an important role in reconciliation and learn more about the truth and continue to walk in a good way, I think we will make a lot of progress. And the BPSOs is just, you're immersed, right? With BPSOs, you're immersed. It's not a one time and you're out. We can have, maybe we can have some of our BPSOs in the fall present, Susan, from, you know, our indigenous focus BPSOs that have been from the beginning with Grace and with Rachel and with Tanya, and just do a good hour presentation because I hear the BPSO saying they learn from us, but I honestly think we learn more from them. In any case, it's beautiful. So thank you, everybody. And again, thanks to Jennifer and to Deborah for an amazing sharing of what you are hearing from colleagues. Keep doing it. Hopefully we can partner and I don't think this is for a one time. I think you asked me how long it will last, 3.5 years. So here you go. You have a 3.5 years project to see how it progresses, how the stories change. The stories will tell a lot if things are getting better, right? It's different than the surveys of RNO, very different, and we will continue to do surveys. We also want to follow nurses that are graduating through the cohort to see what their trajectory is. So we can look at different ways of partnering in a formal way. For now, thank you for sharing. And to all the questions and all the comments from people. And Susan for being joined by the HIP organizing these webinars. We deserve, I think, the July and August without the webinar. Just to remind you, July and August. Last year, we didn't stop because it was a different situation. Hopefully, we can stop to be resumed in September, and we will send you probably some type of 2-question thing just to see what you would like to hear in the fall. Susan, I leave it with you to close, please. Thank you.
Sure, just a very warm thank you from RNAO and all the participants today. I will save the chat and share it with you because there's so many rich comments and gratitude and response to the key points that you made today on those themes and what resonated with people. So really, really hopeful way to end this kind of part of the webinar series as we take a pause over the summer. So just thank you so much for sharing and everyone for participating today and joining us in the webinar. So happy summer all and take care.
Thank you. Thank you all.